Certainly.
Here's section 1 of your HFY story, with a minimum of 700 words. Hashtag section 1. The rule that bound the stars. In the annals of interstellar diplomacy, no rule was more sacred, more feared, or more utterly unbreakable than the first rule of the galaxy. Do not attack human children. Not out of compassion, not due to morality, but because civilizations had tried it before, and the results had always been the same: extinction-level retaliation. The Galactic Council, an ancient and vast body of governance representing over 200 advanced species, had learned this rule the hard way. Over the centuries, their archives quietly accumulated classified records under Red Seal clearance: the massacre at Bellatrix, the obliteration of the Renari fleets at New Tycho, the Seven Suns extinguished during the Sol reprisal. Each incident shared the same trigger: a strike, intentional or accidental, that harmed human young. The humans, relatively late to the galactic stage, had climbed to prominence not solely through diplomacy or innovation, but through an unmatched ferocity when provoked. They were a paradox to the Council: emotionally volatile, yet terrifyingly strategic; curious and open, yet capable of total war without hesitation. And nothing awakened the primal fury of humanity like the endangerment of their children. Which was why the first rule existed, not as law, but as a survival imperative. All Council species knew of it. It was taught in military academies across 5 galaxies, burned into command protocols, whispered among warriors in hushed tones: never go after the Terran young. So when Councillor Zarnax of the Vril Dominion proposed a disciplinary engagement on the disputed frontier world of Auric Prime, many within the Council were shocked. He was young, brilliant, but dangerously arrogant, a rising star among the Vril, a race of telepathic strategists known for their cold, calculative warfare. Zarnax believed the rule was outdated.
A myth.
Propaganda from a species that had managed to intimidate the galaxy into fear-based respect. There is no logical proof, he argued before the Council chamber, that human retaliation is as unstoppable as history claims. These are tales exaggerated by failure and fear. If we allow their colonists to violate Council-claimed space with impunity, what message are we sending? Councillor Trelia of the Drenari Collective, one of the few who had survived the last Terran War, responded sharply. The message is, we value existence. But Zarnax had allies. Quiet ones. Species that had grown resentful of Terran influence, resentful that humans, the upstarts of the galaxy, now held 10% of Council voting power. Whispers of a human problem circulated in secret channels. These allies didn't need to openly support him. They simply allowed the proposal to pass through subcommittees with enough loopholes to permit limited action. The final order was masked in bureaucratic language: a strategic cleansing operation on Auric Prime, justified under colonial regulation clauses. It was designed to target unregistered settlements in disputed territory. Nowhere in the documents did it mention the presence of human children, though they all knew. The operation was passed quietly. Zarnax deployed an elite drone battalion and a Vril forward fleet to Auric Prime. He didn't announce it. There would be no warning. No negotiations. His plan was simple: hit fast, destroy the colony, and retreat before the Terran authorities could respond. He believed that if the humans were hit hard enough and fast enough, they would bluster, but not retaliate. He miscalculated. Deep within the Terran Protectorate, there were still those who remembered what the Council had tried in the past. Earth's leadership, though publicly diplomatic, had not forgotten the cost of those previous attacks. They had quietly developed failsafes, contingency plans, and dormant AI response systems ready to activate at the first sign of violation. And most chilling of all, they had embedded something into every human colony, no matter how remote: a silent, encrypted alert protocol known only as Omega Red. A signal that would bypass bureaucratic command structures, ignore diplomatic channels, and awaken Earth's most lethal systems. The signal could only be activated under one condition: if a human child was harmed in a Council-backed attack. At 0400 Standard Galactic Time, that signal was sent from Auric Prime. A message encoded with the highest priority burst through the void of space. No encryption. No passwords. Just one sentence, repeated 1,000 times over in every major galactic dialect. They broke the rule. By the time the signal reached Earth, humanity was already moving. But back in the council chamber, far removed from the cold stars and the blood-soaked soil of Auric Prime, Zarnak smiled. To him, this was the beginning of a new order. The era of human intimidation was over. The Vril would lead the next age. He did not realize that the age he had just ended was his own. Would you like to proceed with Section 2 next?
Certainly.
Here's Section 2 of your HFY story, with a minimum of 700 words. ## Section 2, The Children of Auric Prime. Auric Prime was a quiet, green world on the edge of council-disputed territory, its skies pale gold in the morning, thick with mist from its freshwater lakes. To most species, it was unremarkable. But to the Terran colonists who had settled there, it was a new beginning. The colony was called New Laconia, a small settlement of just under 3,000 people, scientists, engineers, families. No weapons platforms, no defense grid, just an outpost with a few mounted railguns for wildlife deterrent and one orbital shuttle for emergencies. This was not a military colony. It was a research habitat and frontier home. Dr. Alara Singh, a leading xenobiologist, bent over her workstation in the hydroponics dome, checking nutrient levels in a row of native ferns adapted for Terran consumption. Her twin children, Maya and Eli, had long since run off toward the observation cliffs with their dog, Titan, a lazy but loyal retriever genetically enhanced to survive alien climates. She smiled, half annoyed and half amused. They were supposed to be in remote learning modules for the morning, not exploring dragonfly nests and lichen formations. Down at the perimeter, Sergeant Jace Monroe, a retired Terran Marine, ran drills with the 4-person volunteer security team. Though he was no longer active military, his old instincts never dulled. He didn't like how close the colony was to contested space, and he'd sent multiple requests to the Protectorate for a defensive drone network. All were denied. The territory was low priority, they said. Politically sensitive. He knew what that meant. Don't stir the council. Don't provoke the Vril. Trust the treaties. But treaties didn't stop what came next. At 0422 local time, the sky cracked open. It started with a ripple, an unnatural shimmer in the upper atmosphere as the orbital cloaking field of a Vril strike cruiser dissolved. Within seconds, atmospheric entry trails followed. Dozens of black, oval-shaped drones screamed down toward the surface, shedding ablative plating and igniting retrothrusters to guide their descent. The first explosion hit the power station. Dr. Singh was thrown to the ground as the blast shattered the hydroponics dome. Glass and nutrient solution sprayed across her lab. The airlock doors slammed shut automatically, sealing in what pressure they could. She staggered to her feet, bleeding from her scalp, eyes wide. "Where are the kids?" she whispered. She scrambled for her communicator, but the channel was dead.
Jammed.
Static. On the outskirts of the colony, Maya and Eli crouched behind a rock formation. Titan whimpered beside them. The drones had landed, spreading in a perfect grid pattern. Their movements were smooth, mechanical, silent, save for the hum of anti-grav pads.
Eli had his tablet.
He'd seen enough holovids to know what war drones looked like, even though these were sleeker, darker, alien. He pulled Maya close.
"We run," he said.
"When I say." But before he could count down, one of the drones pivoted its lens toward them. A red that fixed on Eli's chest. They didn't get to run. The drone fired a concussive stun pulse. Eli dropped instantly, twitching. Maya screamed as 2 tendrils extended and wrapped around her. She kicked and struggled, but it hoisted her into a containment pod. Titan lunged at the drone and was vaporized midair. The drone ascended, vanishing into the tree-line with the pod in tow. At the colony center, Monroe had already organized a fallback position at the emergency shelter, a reinforced underground bunker meant for storms and seismic events. But this was neither. He counted at least 50 drones in the air and more on foot. They weren't attacking military targets. They were targeting civilians. He watched 2 drone units advance on a school building. He opened fire with a shoulder-mounted plasma launcher, taking one out mid-stride, but the second broke through the doors. Screams echoed across the comms. He transmitted the only thing that mattered. "This is Sergeant Jace Monroe of New Laconia. Council drones have attacked a civilian colony. Children are down. Repeat, they took the children. Omega Red Protocol authorized. Transmission priority, Alpha 0. The signal, encoded with Terran military failsafes, bypassed all local encryption protocols. As the bunker's doors slammed shut behind the last group of survivors, Monroe slumped to the floor, holding his side where shrapnel had sliced through his armor. He stared up at the flickering light. "They broke the rule," he whispered. "God help them." In the Sol system, buried within a lunar data vault 5 kilometers beneath the Sea of Tranquility, an AI monitoring node detected the Omega Red signal. It paused exactly 3.14 seconds. Then it lit up like a dying star. Within minutes, old subroutines came alive. Military codes long dormant recompiled themselves. Databases unlocked. Threat assessments were updated. The Fury protocol activated. Across Terran space, orbital yards began redirecting resources. Dreadnoughts received orders. Black Ops bunkers under the Martian crust opened. The 3RD Terran Armada, Earth's fastest deployable military unit, received a single command. Auric Prime. Total retaliation. Do not seek surrender. ***. Admiral Surivas, commander of the 3rd Armada, stood aboard the bridge of the TNV Dominion's Wrath, the largest warship ever constructed by human hands. The transmission scrolled across her display. She didn't blink. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then she turned to her communications officer. "Put this on wideband," she said. The channel opened. Every sentient civilization tuned and felt a shiver run through their bones. Her voice was calm, cold. "To the Galactic Council, you violated the first rule. You touched what was never yours. The debt will be paid in full. There will be no negotiations. You had your warning." Her eyes narrowed. "We are coming." "Would you like me to continue with Section 3 next?" "Absolutely. Here's Section 3 of your HFY story, with a minimum of 700 words. ### Section 3. We gave them a chance." In the 30 minutes following Admiral Surivas's transmission, the galaxy held its breath. There had been wars before.
Plenty. Skirmishes.
Proxy conflicts. Border violations. But this was different. The moment the Omega Red signal was confirmed authentic, the Council's entire perception of reality shifted. They hadn't just poked the bear. They had dragged its cub into a cage and waved a blade over it. By the second hour, over 25 Terran warships had emerged from folded space near Auric Prime. By the fourth hour, a black armada shadowed the planet, their hulls marked with symbols ancient even by human standards: ***, wolf, fire, sword, vengeance, ****. The third Terran armada had arrived. Admiral Voss stood motionless on the bridge of the Dominion's Wrath. The ship's interior was silent save for the distant hum of grav plates and the murmured status reports. Before her, a 3D hollow projection of Auric Prime rotated slowly, with red overlays indicating enemy positions. "Have the drones been confirmed as Vril tech?" she asked. Her tactical officer nodded grimly. "Vril strike drones, confirmed by design signature and combat behavior. No council markings. No transponder. Pure Black Ops." Voss's lips thinned. Of course. Just enough deniability to pretend they didn't authorize it. A younger officer approached. "Ma'am, Counselor Zarnax just transmitted a formal request to de-escalate and clarify intent." Voss snorted. "He'll get a reply." She turned to the comms panel. "Patch me through to the Vril homeworld. Public channels. No encryption." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. "Public channels?" Her voice dropped low. "To Zarnax of the Vril Dominion. You know exactly what you did. You can frame it in treaties and protocol and political maneuvering, but this is simple. You broke the first rule. You took our children. There is nothing to clarify. She leaned closer. We are not here to de-escalate. We are here to end you. She cut the transmission. In orbit, Earth's retaliation began. The Harrow-class dreadnought TNV Vehement Blade initiated the first strike, a series of kinetic rods dropped from high orbit, traveling at Mach 30. The impacts shattered entire Council installations in the southern hemisphere of Auric Prime. No EMPs. No precision. No mercy. Just mass and gravity and vengeance. Seconds later, drop pods launched. Terran Marines, clad in powered Aegis suits, descended like iron rain. They didn't speak. Their orders were absolute. Neutralize all hostile drones, secure all civilian survivors, recover every child. In one of the northern impact zones, Sergeant Amira Das, a decorated night ops squad leader, led her fire team through the smoking remains of a research compound. Thermal scans had indicated life signs below. Breaching hatch, she announced. The Marines blew through reinforced blast doors and descended into the Vril facility. Inside, the air was heavy with chemical disinfectant and fear. Banks of alien computers lined the walls, translating human DNA, behavioral data, and neural activity in real time. Transparent pods lined the corridor, some empty, some still humming. Inside one, a little girl floated unconscious, pale and unmoving. Das's helmet identified her. Maya Singh. 7 years old. Status: alive. ***. We've got her, Das said. Requesting evac. She reached in, detached the containment lines, and cradled the child. As she turned, another pod hissed open. A drone emerged, armed, sleek, still active. Before it could fire, a Marine tackled it midair, detonating a short-range plasma charge. They didn't lose anyone. They couldn't afford to. Back on the Dominion's Wrath, Voss was reviewing footage when Dr. Alara Singh's face appeared on the comms. She was in a medbay, bruised and bandaged, but alive. Her eyes welled as she looked at the Admiral. My daughter. Maya, is she? Voss's expression softened only slightly. She's alive. Safe. She'll be on the first medship back to Seoul. Alara broke down in relief. Voss gave her a moment of silence, then cut the feed. Behind her, the battle for Auric Prime was already over. The Vril forces hadn't stood a chance. The Terran Armada had moved too fast, hit too hard. The Council fleet in orbit had withdrawn without a shot fired. Cowards. Voss turned to her operations officer. Prep Phase 2. Target: Vril Prime. Objective: annihilate command and control structures. Zarnax dies today. 10 hours after the initial strike, the Terran fleet folded space again. This time, their destination wasn't a colony. It was a capital. The Vril homeworld, once a proud world of crystalline towers and psionic monoliths, was pierced by iron lances from orbit. Communications centers vaporized. Defense satellites hacked and turned inward. Entire cities drowned in cascading kinetic strikes. The Terran doctrine was absolute. No escalation, only conclusion. At the final battle in the high citadel of Vril Prime, Zarnax himself attempted to flee via subspace portal. A Terran infiltration team, already inside the building, dragged him out mid-activation. When the Galaxies saw the footage later, they would remember the words Sergeant Monroe, still limping, still furious, said over Zarnax's broadcasted screams. You touched our children. Now feel what that costs. The high citadel exploded 30 seconds later, reduced to a crater 3 kilometers wide. The Terran Armada didn't linger. They never did. After justice was delivered, they evacuated civilians, left medical supplies for the few innocent Vril survivors, and departed silently. No boast. No gloating. Just a message carved into the ashes of the high citadel's ruins, translated into every major galactic tongue. We gave you a rule. You broke it. You won't get a second chance. Would you like me to move on and write Section 4 next? Absolutely. Here's Section 4 of your HFY story, with a minimum of 700 words. #Section 4. The price of peace, the fear of memory. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session less than a cycle after the obliteration of the Vril Dominion. The chamber, once brimming with posturing diplomats and smug political maneuverers, was silent. All screens were tuned to a live stream of the aftermath on Vril Prime. Smoke still curled from cities that no longer existed. Orbital feeds showed a planet stripped of infrastructure, power, and pride. The Vril Dominion, once a leading species in Council military strategy, was now a memory, its governing caste annihilated, its fleet shattered, its archives purged. Councillor Trelia of the Drenari, whose scales were dulled from age and diplomacy, stood slowly. Her voice echoed in the stunned silence. They warned us, again and again. For 1,000 years they told us, do not touch their children. And still, one of us broke the rule. She turned to the councillor's seat previously occupied by Zarnax. It was now empty, scarred by fire, blackened by symbolic shame. A red holographic symbol of Terran justice shimmered above it, a single, bleeding handprint, crossed by a line of fire. No more debates. No more questions. We must enshrine the rule as law. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some nodded. Others trembled. None opposed. For the first time in Galactic Council history, a universal edict was signed unanimously, without discussion. The first rule of galactic law: any action resulting in harm or endangerment of human minors, directly or indirectly, shall be considered an act of war against the Terran Protectorate. The law was etched into the central obelisk of the council hall. No species protested. Not the economically powerful Joel. Not the biopsionic Drevlin. Not even the militaristic Glavkarn. Every civilization had seen what happened to the Vril. They understood now. On Earth, the media briefly exploded with the story. Headlines, breaking footage, endless speculation. But the official government stance was firm and brief. Violation confirmed. Retaliation enacted. No further comment. In schools across the Terran worlds, children returned to their learning pods as if nothing had happened. Some whispered about the war. Some bragged about how scary humans were. But most just went back to their lessons, protected by something larger than they could comprehend. In the orbital med station over Mars, Dr. Alara Singh sat beside her daughter Maya, who was sleeping peacefully for the first time since the attack. Beside them sat Eli, his arm in a sling, drawing stars on a glass screen with his left hand. A nurse brought Alara tea. She stared at the swirling liquid. "They burned a world for us," she said quietly. The nurse didn't speak, just nodded once, respectfully. Back on the TNV Dominion's Wrath, Admiral Surivas was reading casualty reports. None of her Marines had died during the Vril campaign. Not a single one. She thought she'd feel pride in that. Relief, maybe. But instead, she felt cold. Justice delivered, she muttered. But at what cost? Her adjutant looked up. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" "Granted." They deserved it. Voss didn't argue. But she stared out the viewport at the stars for a long time. "No child should ever be used as bait," she said softly. "We warned them. We gave them peace. They chose war." She looked back at her officer. "They won't forget this, you know. Not for 1,000 years." And indeed, they didn't. Across the galaxy, stories began to circulate, some real, some myth. Stories of human fury, of dreadnoughts that arrived without sound, of soldiers who didn't speak, only acted, of orbital rods that fell like judgment itself. Entire military academies rewrote their doctrines. New officers were drilled with a mantra that became law, tattooed into skin, burned into cybernetic HUDs. The rule is sacred. The children are untouchable. It didn't matter what species said it. They all understood. Years passed. New Laconia was rebuilt, stronger, with orbital defense platforms and deep space sensors gifted freely by the Terran Protectorate. But the people there didn't speak much of what happened. Maya Singh, now older, occasionally gave interviews, but only brief ones. "We were just kids," she'd say. "We didn't understand why they came. We just knew someone would come for us.
Her voice always cracked on that part.
Eli became a defense strategist. He authored the now infamous treatise, Don't Wake the Wolf, Human Warfare and the First Rule. It became required reading in council military academies. And Sergeant Monroe, who had lost an eye and a lung during the attack, returned to Earth in silence. The government offered him medals.
He refused.
Instead, he built a memorial. A single wall, names etched in silver. Above it, a plaque with the words, "This is what happens when you break the rule." And so the galaxy moved forward, wiser, humbled, united in a kind of fear that wasn't hatred, but respect born of fire and grief. The Terrans returned to peace, not because they were weak, but because they had made a promise. You leave our children alone. We leave your worlds whole. Asterisk, asterisk. It was simple. It was fair. It was final. And from that day on, no one, asterisk, asterisk, no one, asterisk, asterisk, ever broke the rule again. Let me know if you'd like the full 4-section story compiled into a single document, or if you'd like help publishing or formatting it.